What's up, podcaster or about to launch new podcaster? Hey, there was a listener question that came in about how to market a brand new show. They say they just wanted to find some tips and advice of how to launch, how to market a brand new podcast. Like in the very beginning stages of a podcast, they're talking about in their question that I got here in front of me that it's like there's a bunch of different information out there, like how to target your audience, how to optimize, what knowledge you have to have, Facebook ads. And they're like, I just don't know where to start. With all this conflicting advice, we'll say, she just didn't quite know where to start. And so she was reaching out to get some info. And that's what I want to share with you today is I want to give you 5 or 6 different tips for you to be able to market a brand new show, especially in the beginning stages of a podcast. When you have a little bit less, when most people have a little bit smaller budget available. A lot of people think, I want to make sure that my podcast is big before I ever invest any money in it. Although I don't specifically agree, I feel like we need to put that investment into it in the beginning in order to let it pay our dividends, in order to get the result that we're looking for. The beginning is the best time to do it. I do definitely understand that there's a few people that are probably listening, you might be included, where you're saying to yourself, man, but it's so scary. It's scary to put out the money if I don't know if I'm going to have a strong podcast. So I also understand that. So let me give you 5 or 6 tangible takeaways right now.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
So there's actually going to be 6 things that I want to share. I'm going to share them in reverse order. And the number one, I think, is going to be maybe a little bit better. I think they're going to get even better and better. So number 6 is that you will ask your friends, your family, your lover, your coworkers, or your current followers, people that are already following you on somewhere on social media. They all already are on your email list, or you're just your friends and family. You'll connect with them and you'll let them know about your podcast, especially if you feel like the podcast could be valuable to them. If you feel like podcast could be helpful to them, you got to be sharing it with everybody. So another way to say this is relentless self-promotion. You want to always share this. And I use this acronym of everybody's favorite FM radio station. It's WII FM. And that is what's in it for me. Your listener, your mom, your best friend, your partner is screaming at you. Why are you telling me to check out your podcast? What's in it for me? They're saying. What am I going to get out of it? So if you can find that it's going to be valuable to them, beneficial to them, I want you to invite them to check out your podcast. So relentless self-promotion, especially if you think that they could benefit from it. Number 5 is to be visible, to be everywhere that you can. What I mean by this is not necessarily that you got to be on all the social media platforms. You don't have to start a TikTok if you don't already have one. You don't have to do that kind of stuff. When I say be visible, I specifically mean that you want to make sure that people can find your show. So there are a lot of platforms. My company, we help podcasters. And one of the things that we do is we make sure that they're visible on every platform available to them, including a few that most people haven't even heard of. Most people in the US anyway. So there's a platform called Ghana. There's a couple of platforms in India that are quickly, rapidly growing traction. And we don't automatically, like when you start your podcast, you don't automatically go there. You're not automatically connected there. You got to take a couple of extra steps sometimes to connect your RSS feed with all of these other places that you need to be visible. So at a minimum, you want to submit it to all the directories through your platform. So if you're on Libsyn or Buzzsprout or whatever. There's so many different ones. You want to make sure that you are connected to Google, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and all of these other fairly mainstreamed ones. And you want to do the extra work to make sure that you're on Alexa. And I hope I didn't just make your Alexa go off. Anyway, you want to make sure that you are launched up on all of those places. So that's number 5. Number 4, and I think these are getting better and better, is just simply the titling of the episodes and the titling of the podcast. When you're looking at titling, you want to be thinking of salesmanship. You want to think of salespersonship, okay? You want to be thinking of what is going to make a result. Now, I don't want you to bait and switch people. That would be a bad thing. By having clickbait that makes them click on your podcast, but then you don't follow through with the promise, that is a bad thing. So you want to title the episode, but make a promise that you actually can keep. So title the episode with something that incites curiosity. Title the podcast with something that incites curiosity. A big mistake that many people make is when they title their podcast or when they title their episode, they only think as far as what is this? Or they think of what's my company name? And they title their podcast like some random company name that has nobody, people are like, don't have a clue what that would mean. And they leave it. You want them to say, I kind of think I know what that would mean. I want to see that. I'm curious. Okay. You want to incite curiosity. So stop naming it after yourself. Stop naming it after your company. Stop naming it after obscure things, but name it the thing that people are looking for and curious about. Okay. Same thing with the titling of the episodes. You want to incite curiosity. What are they looking for? What are they curious about? What's going to hook them? And of course, you want to make a promise, state a promise, but absolutely be sure that you keep that promise in the content of the episode. So titling of episodes and even the podcast, inciting curiosity, making sure that you're getting somebody to clickbait, but make sure you follow through with a promise too. Strategy number 3, and we've shared 6, 5, and 4. So here comes 3. You want to make sure that you're going where your podcast listener is going to hang out. So when you completely understand your avatar, it's possible that you might think that you need to be on every platform imaginable. And that's just going to be too stressful. You want to be on specific online forums and social media groups that your listener is going to be. And I encourage you to do your absolute best to pick just 1 or 2 platforms, 1 or 2 forums, 1 or 2 social media groups where your avatar hangs out and go all in. If you've ever heard of there's a mile deep and an inch wide, or an inch deep and a mile wide. An inch deep and a mile wide isn't going to touch the hearts of anyone. It's only an inch deep. Maybe a lot of people will see it. Who knows? Because it's a mile wide. But if you want to focus on that forum, that platform, instead of being surface level on a dozen or more social media platforms or online forums, you want to go a mile deep and an inch wide in 1 or 2 perfect platforms where you're part of the community, you're adding value to the community. This can be a huge way to grow your podcast, especially when it's new. Number 2 is making sure you did a pre-launch. Now, we spoke about this a couple episodes ago. Remember the pre-launch, how we had a phase 1 and a phase 2? I'll be sure that my editor links those both below. Remember when we talked about the pre-launch, the phase 1 and the phase 2, how you wanted to really get a movement, create a movement around your podcast, get people to feel like they're part of your podcast. They're looking forward to it in anticipation for your launch. They're waiting for your launch, either because some of those social media posts that we talked about in phase 2, all of those are going to be critically important for a newer podcast, especially if you can do it before the launch. So I want to reiterate how helpful it can be to talk about your podcast before it ever airs, to build anticipation. Netflix does this with their shows. Marvel does it with the movies, with the Marvel comic movies that they put out. You will watch Spider-Man. They'll have 2 or 3 different Spider-Man trailers all over social media, all over YouTube, all over. When you go to a different person's movie, you'll see those. They're building anticipation well in advance of the actual launch of the show or the movie or the podcast. This is a significant way to be able to get people behind it, getting them talking about it. And you're utilizing a special piece of the human psychology, which is fear of missing out. You're utilizing this piece where they're like, oh man, I don't want to miss it. What if it's good? Other people are talking about it. I should too. I go and watch movies just because of the social proofing. I go and watch movies all the time. I listen to people's podcasts because of the social proofing all the time. People talk about things that I could buy. I was at the airport. I did a ski trip this week. And so yesterday I was at the airport and I found out somebody had put these Apple markers, I think that's what they were called, inside of his ski bag. So he was like, I know exactly where it is right now. It moved this many feet and it's coming toward me. And he like knew because of these things and because of his testimony, because of his social proofing, he was actually using the product. I bought a set of 4 of those. They were expensive, but I sat there while I was waiting for my ski bag for my snowboard. I went on Amazon and I purchased this thing because of his social proofing. And your listener and your potential listener are no smarter than me. Okay. I'm not even claiming to be a very smart person, but we all seem to have the same psychological things work for us or against us. And social proofing is always going to make you and me buy a product because other people believe in it. Other people have vested their time in it. Other people say that it's good. We know that it's being used in real life, not just some scam. And I want to go ahead and try it. So I bought it. And your listener is going to do the same thing with strategy 2 is if you build the anticipation before you launch, during your pre-launch. Number 1 strategy is CTAs. Your calls to action. Now, I've mentioned this on many other episodes. What is a call to action? But if you have a newer show, one of the main things that you can do in order to grow your show is say something at the beginning, middle, and end. You want to frequently say something to the effect of, if you're getting value out of this, think of somebody like you. Think of somebody just like you who would also get value from this episode or a podcast like this. And why don't you take the extra 2 seconds to add value to them by sharing this podcast with them so that they can be at the same level as you? I will ask you the same thing. If you're getting value out of my podcast, out of the podcast and podcasting, if you're loving what Adam Adams is spitting this fire today, if it's getting value to you, think of somebody else who's in a place that would also benefit from listening to this episode and share it with them. Because if you share it with them and they share it with their friend, I will double the amount of listeners I can help. I will double the amount of listeners checking out my show. I will double my exposure. I will be able to make more business. It's the same thing for you. If you have calls to action where you're saying, if you're loving this, share it with someone else that you think is going to love this so that they can get benefits from it. It'll still pour into your business. Your listeners will double. So why don't you go ahead and do that? Why don't you share it with a friend? If you do, I think your listener is more likely to share it with their friend. Boom, boom, boom. All right. Bonus strategy. Bonus strategy is paid advertising. So let me go through these again. Number 6 is talking to friends, family, coworkers, your spouse, and relentless self-promotion. Number 5 was make sure people can find it by being on all the platforms, even the smaller ones, even the ones that you hadn't heard of, even the ones that take a little bit of time. Number 4 is titling in your episode, entitling the podcast to incite curiosity. Number 3 was being on a mile deep and an inch wide on 1 or 2 online forums or social media. Number 2 was make sure that you're building anticipation for your show through valid pre-launch formula where you're using those social media posts ahead of time to get more people behind it. Number 1 was call to action at the end saying to share this with a friend, share this with someone who needs it. And the bonus strategy is paid advertising. The bonus strategy is that you can do some things on your podcast where you spend actual money as an investment and it pays back in dividends, because we don't become famous just by having a podcast. We become famous. We make money. We help the world, not because we just simply have a podcast, but because we get more listener base. And you get that listener base by doing all the things we already shared, and as a bonus, by paying for advertising. A couple of takeaways that you could do. You could use Facebook ads. You could do your own private messaging. You could pay a company like ours. Our company does a significant amount of those things, and we also get results. Our clients get ranked into the top 1% in the world. And now that means that they have usually 3,000 or more downloads each and every episode. Because when you're in the top 1%, that's about the amount of downloads that you have. And so you could pay for the advertising. And if you were in front of, most podcasts are in front of 50 to 100, maybe max of 300 people. Most podcasts, 90% are under 300. They're like 50 or 100. If that's where you are and you can make $1,000 a year, imagine what would happen if you had 3,500 downloads. Now you could be making a couple $100,000 a year through your business. Those extra listeners that come to your show either will buy the products of your advertisers or they'll work with you in your business. If you're a coach, if you're a mentor, if you're a real estate investor and you're looking for passive investors, the way to get the most amount of value is to make sure you have more listeners. People pay for attention. Remember that. Facebook pays for attention. All of these social media platforms, what are they mainly looking for? They're fighting for attention. And other podcasters want attention. And they're paying for ads. You're missing out if you're not paying and investing in actual advertising to get in front of those more people. When you do, you're getting in front of the listeners of other people's podcasts, boxing them out, and you're able to be the one who makes the most amount of money. So paid advertising is another amazing strategy. I hope you took notes. I'll see you on the next episode. This is serious. Don't go. Now that you've gotten whatever value that you feel that you got, the actionable takeaways, you need to implement the stuff that you learned. If you remember me talking about bird church once, and they learn how to fly, and then they walk home, I don't want you to walk home. I want you to fly home. So take the steps, take the actionable steps for your benefit so that you can become a better podcaster. That's the only thing that I ask of you. And I'll see you for more actionable tips on the very next episode.